What's up? My name is Alex Terranova. I am the host of the Dream Mason podcast. Welcome. We started this in 2017 because we wanted to highlight the journey of Dream Masons. There's a Dream Mason in all of us. A Dream Mason is someone who is awake to their dreams and driven by the passion, the purpose, and the desire to turn that dream into reality. We interview athletes, gold medalists, Super Bowl champions, artists, creatives, 8-9-figure entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, and everyone in between. And sometimes we even walk them through challenges that they're currently facing. So depending on whether you're catching this as a regular interview or a playing with problems segment, there is something for you, whether you're at the peak of your journey, at the low point of your journey. I look forward to having you join me on this journey. And I hope that this show helps you unleash your inner Dream Mason. What's up, and welcome back to Playing with Problems. I am your host, Alex Terranova. I was just having a fun conversation with our guest, who you're going to meet in a minute, about like childhood nostalgia and video games and sports trading cards and like all these things from our childhood. And if you grew up in a different, I'm 40, if you're 20 years older than me, if you're 20 years younger than me, childhood nostalgia is different for all of us, right? It has to do with the age that we grew up in, the time period we grew up in, the things we liked, what felt important to us. And as we get into this episode, I don't know how much we'll dive into that, but talking to him about it just got me thinking about how our childhoods have these two different directions they go. We have these nostalgia-y things that like make us feel so good, make us feel so warm, right? Like if we were talking about video games and trading cards, and when I think back to those things, it's just like I get happy, I light up, I feel like warm inside. It feels really safe and comfortable. And then there's this other side of childhood, which is the complete opposite, where we like things felt scary. Maybe it was our parents, maybe our parents had anger things or sadness things or depression things. Maybe it was like the neighborhood we grew up in. Maybe we didn't have enough. Maybe things happened to us that we would prefer had not happened to us, or we don't want to happen to children. And it just made me think about like how the universe has like daytime and nighttime, how our childhoods have these like light and dark. And I would assert that all of us have some version of some light and dark in our lives. And we do spend a lot of time, trauma is a big buzzword in our world in 2022. And it just having that conversation with our guest made me just think back, man, I should give more energy to those things that made me nostalgic, more energy and time to remembering the things that felt good about childhood, because of like, if we don't feel good in our lives, like, what's the point? And if all we have to do is think back to those nostalgic moments, whether they be like holidays or birthdays or time with our brothers and sisters, or that thing we did with our parent, that first baseball game our dad took us to or something, and we get to like feel that rush of joy. It's like, that's what I think memories are for. And it just made me think about like how often we maybe skip over that and we're focused on all the kind of crappy stuff that happened to us in our life, or all the things that didn't happen to us. So that's your, mindset nugget of wisdom. Take it or leave it. And let's introduce our guest. Our guest today this should be an interesting conversation, because this is the first time, I think this might be the first time in any podcast I've interviewed somebody with this job. I have interviewed somebody with this job, but not in the way that this person does it, actually. So our guest today is a game designer. And when I say game designer, a long, long time ago on the Playing with Problems podcast, I interviewed a game designer, but he was like word games, Scrabble kind of games, like in newspapers, things like that. Our guest today is like a video game designer, more digital, phone, computer, could be even console, but video, those types of games. He's also a design consultant. He thinks of himself as a problem solver. He's also married, and he has his first child on the way, which is pretty big life-shifting, changing moment. Julian Marinoff, welcome to Playing with Problems. How you doing, man?
Hey, Alex, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for helping me with that. I never plan what I never plan what I'm going to say when I do my preambles on any podcast. I really like to see like what shows up, what feels natural. And I just appreciated that conversation we were having before we hit record. It felt really fun. I noticed when we stopped, I felt really good. I felt way more alive than I did before we started talking.
Oh, that's great. One of the things I like about my career and being involved in gaming is that it's such a fun field. And I can talk about gaming, for hours of all different types. It's just, it's a great thing to do. And, I love having fun, and talking about it generally makes me happy too. So I'm glad you could share that.
Isn't it funny that when you shared with me before we hit record that we're about the same age, and I don't know about you, but I remember being a kid, and when I would play video games, my parents were basically like, "You're rotting your brain. This is not a good thing. You should be doing like this. Will never make money, right? You'll never this." And now, 30 years later, roughly, it's the complete opposite of whatever. Did you have that same experience?
Somewhat, but maybe not to that extreme kind of cliche degree. But I did hear that from a lot of my friends. I was fortunate to have kind of very accepting parents who kind of just believed in me to find my own path. And so there were certainly times when they would say, "Hey, like, what are you doing? It's 1 a.m. and you're still up gaming. Maybe you should go to sleep," kind of thing. But they never really got to the point where they said, "Oh, like gaming's bad and it's not going to lead to anything, and so you shouldn't do it at all." But the funny thing is, it took me a long time to actually come around to making game design a career, mainly because it had been my hobby for so long. I had this weird fear that if I made it my career, it would somehow sap the joy and love out of it. Of course, it turned out to be the opposite. It got me even more involved. But so I'm glad I kind of overcame that. But the short answer is no, my parents were quite supportive, actually. But I mean, that story, you hear about it all the time.
Yeah, I would say my parents were pretty supportive, but I think that it's a very cliche story. But I think they would have loved me doing things other than sitting in my room for hours.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. But luckily I grew up in a time when kids still played outside. Not everyone was on the internet. So even though we had like console gaming and board games and stuff like that, there was still a good balance, kind of a healthy balance of like maybe playing too many games, but also still like doing other things and going outside.
Yeah, I played a lot outside. It was like a lot outside when the lights were on. And then when the lights were off, I have those stories where I stayed up all night long and was so tired, and just ruined my next day. But you could bounce back when you were a kid.
Oh, for sure.
Let's talk about what makes you feel like in your life you're successful, or you've been successful.
Well, I feel successful in my outlook on life. I think that I'm kind of known for being optimistic and having a lot of self-belief and self-confidence, and always trying to see the best in things, even in bad situations. I'm always looking for the silver lining, or maybe even some humor. And I think that that's an important quality. And it's what attracts other people to me, whether, as friends or colleagues. People enjoy talking to me about stuff because I tend to find the lighter side of things or the brighter side of things. And on the one hand, helping people not take things so seriously because, it's only life, right? But also always having that endless kind of optimism that things can always get better, or things could always be worse somewhere else, trying to help people kind of break out of their sort of bubbles or limited outlooks. So I feel like I'm blessed in a sense. I've had a chance to travel a lot, and being the son of a philosopher, I was always taught from an early age to question everything and try to always look deeper or look at things from a different point of view. So I feel very successful in my overall outlook and my belief in myself. And also, I would say, I think I'm very successful as a partner and a husband, and soon to be a father. As many people know, relationships aren't easy. Just because you love someone and they love you, it doesn't mean you're not going to struggle at times. And, usually big passion can also lead to big arguments and big outbursts. And, I pride myself on never kind of giving up on that. And, when you're with someone and you genuinely want to spend the rest of your life with them, that's a major commitment. And there's a lot of times when people may get a voice in the back of their head that says, you should get out of this or give up on this, or, it's not worth it. It takes a certain kind of strength and determination, perseverance to like say, no, like we can overcome this and we can get through these things. And And every time you do, it makes the bond stronger and greater. And, it's amazing. Like, I've loved my wife since, the early days of meeting her. And that's only increased over time. I didn't think it could be possible. There were times where I'm like, man, I love this woman so much. And then, 5 years later, it's like, wow, like my feelings are even stronger than they ever were before. And now that we're on the verge of having a child, it's like off the charts. I can't even express my joy at that situation. So I also feel super blessed and successful in love. And, to a certain extent, also just in happiness in general. I mean, I've always been a really happy person, and maybe because I've always prioritized having fun in life, sometimes, to my financial detriment, but, something we'll probably move on and talk about a bit later, but I never really cared that much about money. And I think that enabled me to experience more joy in life. And that's something I'm also proud of. And I think, that's like a good kind of gauge of success. It's like, how happy are you day to day? There's a lot of people chasing dreams, chasing material things. And it's like, they can't find peace and happiness until they kind of reach that. But then oftentimes you hear they reach that goal and then it's great, that's not enough. On to the next thing, But can you wake up happy? Can you go to bed happy? Can you be living in the moment, So I feel very successful in that regard as well.
You talked a little bit about your relationship with your wife and you said like, people have challenges. How do you two, is there a strategy that you two have that supports the relationship to be successful? Because we all have, right? It doesn't matter how perfect you all are. There's challenges, right? Life throws things at you. So do you guys have something you do or a way that you practice to keep your marriage, like, let's say, expanding versus contracting?
Yeah. So we are very communicative and open. And even if, if something bothers us, what we try to do is not let it linger or not let it fester in the back of our minds. If there's an issue, bring it up right away and let's talk it out. And if it's going to lead to a fight or an argument, so be it. But at least we're going to air our grievances, get it off our chest. I think the biggest problem is that people keep things to themselves. They say, oh, like maybe they're annoyed by something or bothered by something, but they don't want to bring it up because they're afraid of the conflict that's going to arise. But when you sit on these things for an extended period of time, they can start to generate resentment. And ultimately, if you don't let it out, it could be more harmful in the long run. Whereas if you just get it out right away, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, you might have an argument. Odds are it's not going to be something that's, life ending or game breaking or deal breaking. And if it is, well, maybe that's not the right person for you anyway. If you reach some type of problem that can't be resolved, then maybe that's, a sign of something else. But for us, it's really just about communication and basically not stopping until whatever issue is resolved. And maybe we don't even necessarily agree, right? But at least if we can both kind of air our sides of it, then we can often come to, at the very least, some type of compromise where we can kind of acknowledge the other person's position or point of view and say, okay, you know what? I don't necessarily agree with that, but I accept that that's your viewpoint and I can live with that, and vice versa. And then you have that kind of freedom of, okay, well, that's dealt with and it's not an issue anymore. So fortunately for us, we don't fight very often at all. I'd say probably way on the lower end compared to, other couples. And we tend not to have repeat fights about the same things because we're really good at like dealing with anything that comes up. And then if ever there's some other challenge, it's something new or different. So long story short, our motto is communication and, resolution and a compromise if necessary.
I love you. You spoke about resentment in there, and you talk about, we air the things out, we let it all out. And I don't know if you know this. I don't know if our listeners know this. Resentment is the number one, according to the Gottman Institute, which is the most successful. The Gottman Institute is like the most successful. I don't know if it's like therapy, like what we would call it, but in determining like success of relationships, they have this uncanny ability to like work with couples and basically see based on if they're going to succeed or fail. And the modality that they use that this doctor created, Doc Gottman, is about resentment. That if when you're observing a couple, if there's resentment in their being or their voice, the likelihood of a relationship not working, because things that we resent, we end up like wanting to get rid of. We want to burn, we want to destroy, we want to go away. And that over time, that's what we'll do with our relationship. So
Interesting. I didn't know that, but it makes sense.
yeah, I love that. And that one of the ways you always avoid that is by keeping essentially lines of communication open.
Yeah. Another big factor I would add is we're both very aware of ego. And so we both make a concerted effort not to allow the ego to take over. A lot of people say they don't live with ego, and most people who say that probably don't. But I've noticed that where it tends to creep up is if you get into conflicts, right? Especially with like a long-term partner, spouse. You can have that feeling of, oh, like I'm going to win this fight, or I'm going to win this argument. And that's purely from the point of ego. So both of us make the effort not to look at it as a point of like, oh, someone's going to win or lose this argument. That's not the purpose of it. It's to really just resolve the issue. And I think it takes a big person to be able to say, to admit they're wrong. And a lot of that could be like a big hindrance for people in a conflict, is like holding on to some idea just because they're afraid of saying, you know what, you're right. Or I did do this, or I did do that. And, if you can just check the ego, that could be a really big help also in resolving these issues.
It speaks a lot to the piece that you said at the end of, which was about acceptance, like accepting what the other person says, even if you don't agree with it, which I know for me, I can find really challenging, right? Like and that's ego. Ego wants to be right. Ego does not like the idea of I can accept and be okay with what you believe or what you're doing, even if I wouldn't do it myself, even if I wouldn't. That's a challenging place to be. I think of it as approval, is like, can you give full approval to the things that are simply because they are, even if they're not the way you like them or they should be? I know for myself, that's one of the most challenging things in a relationship, is putting that down.
Absolutely, it is. But I think it's important. And, not to completely digress, but I think that that's also, if people were better at doing that in the relationships, I think we would also have kind of more peace and harmony throughout the world. Because a big problem we have internationally and in all aspects of life is people not being able to let go of these things, and saying, oh no, like you're wrong and I'm right. If people were a little more accepting, obviously within reason, but of others and their decisions, then I think, the world would be a better place too.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I mean, if you look at the world, I think the world is our relationships are a microcosm of what's happening in the world. We have disagreements and anger and abuse and intolerance and trauma in our interpersonal relationships. Like we have them in our couple relationships, we have them in our family relationships, we have them in our little communities, we have them in it's like, it just expands. And I 100% agree. If we were able to, on a small level, just work on that with our partners or within our families, then when we left our homes, we would bring that out into the next level, and it would ripple outwards.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I want to do something different on this episode. And I told you I was going to do this. I want to talk about the current challenge you're facing and where, what difference you'd like to make with this challenge. But before we kind of just shift, because it's kind of a big shift in this moment, let's just say what that challenge is to get that out. And then I'm going to have us pause for a minute and just kind of change the energy. So what is that challenge for you?
So the biggest challenge I'm facing right now is essentially a financial and career challenge. I'm trying to find a way to turn my dream into a reality. And to do that, it takes money. And so this is where I'm struggling most right now, is acquiring the funds I need to, generate the game I want to generate and ultimately generate the kind of wealth I want to generate to kind of move on with my other plans. So I feel very like I've hit a wall, essentially. And this has been going on for like a couple of years now.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being willing to come on here and, talk about that, because this is a problem that many people are challenged by in varying degrees, right? It might not be to get money for their game or a business, but it might be that they want to have more wealth. They want to have more retirement. They want to save. They want to provide more for their family. I would say I've been a coach for 8 years, since 2015, about 8 years now. And I would say 99% of the people I work with, financial stuff comes up at some point. It doesn't matter, right? If they have all the money, they're worried about losing it.
Yeah.
So there's something that I could actually say this. My coach said to me once, money is your endless spiritual teacher. That money itself means nothing, but it creates the tension in all these different areas of our life that actually creates opportunities for us to learn lessons.
Yeah.
So we can transition to talk about this. Let's just take a second, and I want you to close your eyes.
Okay.
And I just want you to take a deep breath or two. Pretty simple. Just take a deep breath. And I want you to just imagine yourself in your dream or your fantasy life where all your career and financial successes have worked out. Your game has been funded. Your game has been sold. Your game is selling. You're seeing the numbers and you're ecstatic about them. You're proud of yourself for what you created and the revenue that's coming in. You see yourself being able to take care of your family in a way that maybe you never had before. And then I don't want to put anything else on you because I don't know what you want, but just take a second and imagine the life you would have if this was no longer a thing and you had it exactly the way you wanted it. When you're ready, just kind of come back to me.
Yeah.
Cool. Could you see it? Could you see like the...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. What did you see?
Well, this is something I've visualized before, so it kind of brought me back to a place where I've been.
Great.
And, ultimately, a lot of people have different motivation for wanting to achieve wealth. And for me, it's always been about more than just myself. Yes, I want to live well. I want to have nice things. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to travel. But more than that, I've always felt a burden of wanting to be able to improve the world and, leave a world better when I leave it than how it was when I came into it. And so my long-term goal is to generate wealth so that I can then start to give it back. And the way I want to do that is by enabling individuals. I believe that the greatest innovations, inventions, world-changing things all come from ideas, individuals with unique, amazing ideas. So I'd like to be in a position where I could travel around the world, find these people who have these amazing ideas, but don't have the means to bring them to reality. And I want to help them do that. But so before I could do that, I need to get myself.
Is that what
there.
you saw? Is that what you saw? You saw yourself like going around the world and like helping people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Beautiful. Awesome. Perfect. So let's talk about, this is great. You are the first, I've had so many people come on here and talk about so many different topics, but this is the first conversation we got to have about money, which I think is really important because, like I said, we all have it and, or we don't, we all have it or we don't have it, but we all are weird about money. We all get wacky and we all have these things. So I'm curious if by the end of this conversation together, we could make a difference for you when it came to your career, where you are financially, right? You're not going to have money when you end this podcast, right? That's not the goal. But if we were to get somewhere by the end of this, what might we give you or provide for you that would have you leave here going, I got value from this. This went well for me.
That's a good question. Because I've always had a very interesting relationship with money in the sense that I never really cared about it. And there's kind of two reasons for that. One, I grew up very middle class, but I noticed the amount of stress both my parents underwent whenever it came down to finances of any type. They were so stressed by money, always worried that they wouldn't have enough. And I saw that and it kind of like made me not want to feel that,
Yeah.
And in my late teens, I got into a lot of debt. By normal standards, it probably wasn't that much. But for me at the time, it was a huge amount. For some reason, I got a credit card when I was 17. I didn't have a job. I maxed it out. Then I needed to get a line of credit to pay off the credit card. And then I remaxed both of those out. And it was like this chain reaction, getting more debt and using it to pay off the other debt and then getting into more debt again. So all of a sudden, I had those feelings where I felt like this weight was holding me down and this burden of debt. And I was able to work really hard one year finally and like pay it all off. And then I felt that sweet release of not owing anyone anything. And I said to myself, never again, I don't want to experience that. And so I always lived hand to mouth. I could always pay my rent. I could always put food in my mouth. And it was great. I lived life. I flew by the seat of my pants. It didn't matter. I was never trying to save. I was never trying to accumulate. I just didn't care. Money was not important to me. And it was really nice. But as you get older, you get more responsibility. And now that I'm married and I have a child on the way, now I'm feeling that sense of kind of, okay, I need to have stability. I need to be able to provide. And I can't just live the way I used to anymore. So money has become sort of more important to me again. But to answer your question, I don't really know what we can kind of discuss or where we can go that's going to like change my outlook or make me feel better, but maybe we'll just get there by going through different things, but it's one of the things I honestly can't say I can see a direct kind of pathway to a big epiphany. It doesn't mean that one couldn't happen, but I don't really see it, I suppose.
So, well, it sounds like that's what you're looking for, though. A change of outlook or a big epiphany.
Well, maybe. I mean, that's because you asked me what would would kind of cause like a change. So that's kind of how I'm wording it, right? But I don't really know. It's hard for me to imagine. So that's what I'm not saying we can't get there, but I'm not really sure like what it would be. But I'm curious, definitely.
Well, this is a cool way to look at it, right? So you design games, and a lot of the games you design are adventure games or fantasy games. And in those games, the characters have to go somewhere or do something.
Yeah.
The game is impossible if the game started with the character not knowing what they were supposed to do or where they were supposed to go.
Yeah.
The knowing where I'm supposed to go or what I'm supposed to do, even if I don't know how, right? When I start playing a game, I don't necessarily know how to do any of the things, but I do know, the mission of this game is to blah, blah, right?
Right. You have an end goal.
Yeah. There's no point. And I would equate that to here in this journey in the game we're playing right now. We don't know how we're going to get anywhere. We don't even know what we're going to do together. It's kind of like the same, but we do need to know like where we want to go, right? By the end of this game, maybe this happens, or this is what I would like to happen. That is, I think, one of the, it's often one of the more challenging questions that I ask people, whether it be on this podcast or in my personal practice, is like, hey, what do you want to happen today? And often their response is very similar. Like, hey, I'm not really sure. I don't know. And I would put it back to you and say, well, what if you had to choose, right? What if in the next 40 minutes or so, we could create something, but we could only create it if you were willing to say what you wanted to create. It's like a magic trick, right? You got to be able to say the trick we want to perform, or we can't perform anything. So what could we, is it like a change of outlook? Is it a mindset shift? Is it, right, brainstorming or ideas on how? There's so many ways. If in the next 40 minutes we were able to make a difference, what way would you like us to be able to?
It's a good question, a good way of putting it. I feel bad that I don't have like an immediate answer.
Yeah, you're fine. It's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I said earlier, I have a lot of self-belief. And there have been many times along the way where I've had these obstacles and challenges that have kind of stymied me and stopped me and forced me to reroute myself, And so I've spent a lot of time already kind of struggling even with my own vision and saying, is this really possible? Is this really attainable? And the answer was always yes. It's just, I see every challenge as an opportunity or as an obstacle that's going to somehow teach me something and get me closer to where I want to be. So I wouldn't say that I'm lacking the outlook. I don't need to be convinced that my dream could come true. I just need to, like I believe in all that. And I don't think that there's necessarily some magical answer. Oh, if you just did this, it'll happen. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's really the case. So again, I'm just stalling here, trying to think of things that aren't, where I'd like to go at the end of this call. But that's a tricky question, maybe even particularly in my case, because I spent so much time thinking about it and already going through the motions of trying to get there. It's a really tough one. You kind of stumped me.
It's okay. So here, let's see if this helps. I'll bring you back to something you shared earlier, which is you spent most of your life not caring about money.
Yeah.
And a lot of your childhood, money equaled stress.
Yeah.
And I would even say that once you became an adult, money equaled stress because of the story you shared around debt.
Yeah.
So there's a really long narrative of your life, where money was stressful. And we might even say, could we go as far to say maybe like money wasn't like the best thing, right? It like came with like burden or trouble.
Yeah, we could say that.
Okay. And then you're in a place in your life where you're stuck, or maybe we might say stressed around wealth and generating wealth.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
So if we just connect those, right, we now say that, hey, for almost all of your life, there's been some story around money equaling stress, there not being enough, it causing problems, and it really not aligning with the way you want to live your life, right? Because I hear about you're a guy who wants to have fun, you care about relationships, and it seems like money is like kind of this like almost like little insidious thing that like gets in the way or creates problems.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it might be tough to create wealth from a place where we think wealth is a bad thing, where we think money is kind of a bad, I'm using the word bad because it's simple, but where we think money is like a bad or stressful or negative thing. Right. Then all the energy you have about wealth and money is actually not all of it. A lot of it is negative.
Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying. That does make sense. Yeah. I wouldn't say I particularly I don't think money's bad, but I would agree with you that there has been a lot of association, maybe especially subconsciously, that, generating wealth and needing wealth is like a stressful endeavor. And maybe that's something that I've somehow been avoiding or having trouble reconciling. So yeah. Cool. Yeah. I didn't see it that way.
So if we were to, if maybe this like, and you get to choose, remember, you get to choose here. I'm just hoping to support you.
Yeah.
If we could like move the needle on your relationship to money or wealth, like the way you held it in your, like energetically, would that make a difference for you?
Yeah, I think it would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So that could be like the thing that you want, like that would provide value for you in this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Cool. I think personally over here, I think it would provide value for me. I think it would provide value for most people. And I think it's so important because I don't think this is a stuck point for so many people. I think this is a great conversation we get to have. So I want to ask you some questions so we can really see this like all play out.
Okay.
When you think about, you told us a little bit about your like family origin of money, right? When you think about money, wealth, money, like these kind of these things are linked. What are the like stories or narratives that you remember being told growing up about these things?
So it was things like you got to we can't spend too much. We got to be careful about what we're spending money on. It doesn't grow on trees, kind of thing, right? Like essentially the fear that there's not enough and that our needs will end up costing more than what we're bringing in. So always this kind of worry. And also my parents were divorced when I was 4 years old. And so earlier on in my life, they didn't have a very good relationship with each other. And so there were also fights between them about what each of their responsibilities were financially for me, right? And so when I'd be with one, they'd kind of sometimes bad talk the other and vice versa. So I think that also put a bit of a twist in my kind of aversion to the stress of money, because I saw that it also created conflict between two people that I loved. So it made me very hesitant to like ask for things or to and to even want things, because I knew that could potentially lead to like more conflict of, like, what do you want this for? We can't afford that, or whatever the case may be. So
can you, or not can you, Do you see yourself now as an adult, maybe not asking for things or wanting things because of that like old story?
Probably. That may be, I've been very kind of thrifty in a sense. Like I don't like to, well, that's not even true because I'm actually quite generous. I like to spend money, particularly on other people if I have the means, if I can. But I think I kind of live a frugal lifestyle in general. And maybe that's what kind of underpins it or justifies it in my mind. I don't really go deep into it when I make those decisions, but I tend to err on the side of spending less, wanting less, doing less, and always looking for like free entertainment, free fun, and just trying to not spend money.
Yeah, there's no conflict there.
Yeah.
And there's no conflict in giving it away. That makes everyone happy.
Yeah. Very true, actually.
Right. It reminds me of when I work with somebody who grew up in a household where somebody was angry a lot. Mm-hmm. Right. Dad was angry, and maybe dad's anger was scary. It's like very common. And especially from boys, if there was negative associations from that, maybe they got hit or it was scary, often either they'll go the same route, right? They'll have anger issues, or they'll be like me, and other men I know, where it's like, man, anger is weakness. It's a bad thing. I don't want that. I'm not going to be like that. And then we go the other way and we're trying to avoid being angry.
Yeah.
Right. Both are a reaction to the thing. And that's, I see that with here, right? Like these are reactions to money being conflict.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is this that you can see this mindset now around money? What do you feel like this has cost you in your life? Like having this relationship to money, what does it cost you?
Well, it certainly cost me wealth. It's something I actually, now that you're mentioning this, it's starting to bring back some memories of stuff I've thought about. But everyone kind of does this game with themselves. It's like, if I could go back in time, what would I do differently, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you have regrets, but it's definitely something kind of a fun exercise to do, or maybe even not fun, but something that people end up doing. So, or how would you, what would you do differently with like your child, right? Mm-hmm. Compared to how you grew up. And now that you mentioned it, one of the big things is actually around money. Like, if I could do things differently, or if I could, when I raise my child, I would encourage them to earn money and save money. And it doesn't mean you can't have fun and be a kid and do all those things, but it's like, if you can, the earlier you start accumulating wealth, the more free you're going to be, and the more opportunity you'll be able to create for yourself in life. I mean, whether we like money or not, it's the greatest tool in the world, right? Because it can equal anything. I mean, it's the fundamental currency of almost everything. Except like health and happiness. But, in terms of like operating in the world, like no one can deny the importance of money, unless you want to be like, like a monk living under a tree or something, which is okay too. But if you want to be any kind of mover and shaker and do things, you really need money. So I think my aversion to it certainly set me back on my path to wealth and to achieving the kind of goals I want to achieve. Because what I wanted to do with my life has always kind of been the same, even though I didn't always know how exactly. I've always had that vision since I was very young that like I want to make a global impact. I've always felt like I could do something good beyond myself in the world. And by a lot of people's metric, I'm way behind in terms of that timeline. Like a lot of people my age are on the verge of retirement. Whereas I feel like I haven't even gotten started yet. So I would say it's certainly set me back in terms of time.
Yeah. And so what I hear is your aversion to money, your aversion to conflict and wealth in this way has stolen time from you. It's stolen opportunities from you. It's stolen possibility, but really it's also stolen the ability to give back in the way that really matters. So it didn't just steal from you. It's stolen from all the people
that I could have been helping.
Could have been helping.
Yeah.
And we could play even further. It's like, let's look at your parents. Like, what did this energy of money steal from them?
I don't know. What do you mean?
Well, like, what do you think it stole from them? I mean, you shared before it created fights.
Okay, I see.
Right.
Yeah.
So how it stole things from you, like energetically speaking, right? It's not actually stealing, but metaphorically, energetically speaking, it's taken opportunities from you because of the relationship you have with it. And it sounds like that got passed down from your parents. They taught you this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I mean, they're both okay now, they're like financially pretty stable. And my mom's retired. My dad still works because he loves it, but like they're both fine. So I would say, I mean, financially, like it probably didn't hurt them, but I think it probably caused them a lot of undue stress and anxiety, and maybe took away a lot of potential for relaxation and happiness, carrying on all that worry all those times,
Yeah, beautiful. Not that they experience that is beautiful, but that you can see that. I think it's so important to separate the two. My parents are fine financially, but I don't know too many people who stress more financially than them. And that's not a bad, I don't think that's even their fault. That's how they were brought up, is like worry and concern. And so we could take away all their money and they'd still have the same exact worries and concern. They don't, when I look at it, it's like, man, they don't even get to be fully happy and enjoy what they have.
Yeah.
Because of the stress and the worry.
Yeah. And the funny thing is that didn't help them, like they still ended up where they were going to end up anyway. So they could have just not been stressed. It wouldn't have changed the outcome, but it would have made their journey probably a lot better.
The experience. Yeah. So something I like to do is, if we thought about your relationship with money as like a movie, and we had to give it a theme, it sure doesn't sound like a romantic comedy or a love story. What genre would your money, you and your relationship to money, be in?
I'd see it as probably like an adventure quest,
Okay.
Where there's that like treasure at the end of the tunnel, and I'm trying to navigate through all kinds of like wacky twists and turns to ultimately get, to the reward. That's kind of what jumps to mind.
Well, your goal is that you would get to the reward. You haven't got there, right? So right now in your adventure quest, it's like
it's there, but it's out of reach still.
Yeah, and it's like the bad guy or whatever the obstacles are keep kind of keeping you from it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it's an adventure quest. Then maybe we keep having a to be continued because we haven't got our hero to actually win. We haven't completed their hero's journey yet.
Right.
So let's what if we were to like reinvent this relationship you have?
Okay.
So, actually, I'm gonna change where I was just going because something just popped into my mind. You said something earlier in our conversation that I think was pretty profound and beautiful, and most people I don't hear this from. You talked about what serves your relationship with your wife as being able to be communicative and accepting.
Mm-hmm.
What if we brought that strength to your relationship with money? What if we brought your ability to accept it for what it was, on how it is, exactly how it is, even if you don't like it, to the party, and your ability to communicate with it, right? You have a relationship with it. It's just not a person. It's a thing. Right. Just like you have a relationship. I want to be clear, right? You have a relationship with video games. You have a relationship with everything, right? That we do. Money just is huge because it's all around us all the time.
Yeah.
So if you were to bring acceptance and communication into your relationship to money, what might that look like? What would that change, or what would it look like?
That's a good question. You give me something to think about again. So how would I communicate with it? So when you talk about acceptance, you're saying like accepting my current relationship with it, or accepting what it represents for someone? Or are you kind of open-ended?
Yeah, I want to see what you see. And those are your strengths, right? Those are your strengths that you have over there in another area. So it's like, hey, what if we brought that over here and like just looked at it? We just explored.
Well, I guess what jumps to mind is I suppose I would have to accept that it's a necessity, especially if that's kind of what's fueling my end game goals, right? Like I need to have access to money. I need to allow it into my life in abundance. So I need to accept that fact. And I suppose given that, I would also have to accept that there's going to be stress around it as well, because there always has been, and there is for many people. So the conversation I would probably want to have is, how can I accept it and the need for it, but maybe discuss like what the stress points are and how I can maybe alleviate those. If not completely mitigate them, at least like be aware of them and be able to work with them.
Yeah. It's beautiful because you said before your parents would be in the same place whether they had the stress or not.
Yeah.
So the stress doesn't actually need to come with money.
Right.
That was a choice they unconsciously made.
Yeah.
So you would have to practice like finding a level of acceptance with money as part of your journey.
Hmm.
I might like if you were to communicate with it, right? If you could imagine money just as simply as an energetic, right? It's just an energetic tool that moves. It really just moves energy, right? It's a transactional tool. If you could start communicating with it and cultivating the relationship on purpose, what could that look like?
Well, I guess the way I look at it is, like I said, I'm a very kind of positive person and I have a lot of kind of benevolent goals. So I would probably say, hey, money, come to me. Like we could do some really great things, and for like the right reasons. A lot of people attract money for like greedy or selfish reasons, but I don't feel like that's me. So I think it would be beneficial for more than just myself, if money would come my way. So I might start by saying that.
Okay, so here's something I'll offer you a practice, and this isn't the right one. This is something me and my fiance made up and this is tough because we're spending money so often in our lives, right? We click a button on our phone, we hit a button on our computer, we walk into a place and swipe a card, we take cash out. There's so many ways we can spend money. So that's why I say it's a little challenging, but we're trying this thing and we've been trying it for a little while now where every time we spend money, no matter what it's on, be $1, or it could be giving $1 away to a homeless person. It could be swiping a credit card for a huge transaction. We're practicing pausing in that moment. It could be before, could be during, could be after, depending on the situation. And having gratitude for the money and what it's providing for us. Right? Like the other day, we had to pay money for like a car repair. I don't think any of us are excited about that.
Not usually.
But in the moment, I was like, I'm so grateful that I have the money to get this car fixed. Some people don't, right? They would just be like, the car's just broken now. I'm so grateful I have the money to give some away to this person on the street. Thank you for letting me have the money that I can buy this dinner at this restaurant. But in the moment, actually, when I say like we're saying it out loud, maybe we say it in our head if it's not appropriate or at the time, but like to actually communicate with it, just as if I took you to lunch, right? You'd probably be like, thanks, man, for taking me to lunch.
Yeah.
Starting a relationship with our money.
Interesting.
That is on purpose instead of whatever the default is, like, man, $800 to fix that car. Ugh. Right. And then that's the energy, right? Imagine if like I took you to lunch and you're like, an hour I had to sit here with you. I don't want to take you to lunch again.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's a cool idea. I would definitely try that.
So, and you can make up your own, right? Like I think that we made that up. But cultivating, I journal with money. I like write to I write to it, my fears about it, just like you do with your wife. You like let it all out. So I write about my feelings about it, my fears, my thoughts, the stories. And then, I like listen to what comes back and I write kind of what comes, like the thoughts that show up when I'm letting it out, right? Because your mind's constantly going. So I've crafted my own way to have a conversation. You can craft your own way.
Interesting. Let me tell you another little anecdote about money that just occurred to me, because I think it's quite meaningful in my case, and I'd be curious to hear what you think about it, and also just to share it. Just to preface, a lot of people believe in that we kind of manifest our own destinies, right? The things we believe in the recesses of our mind will ultimately kind of unfold in our lives, right? And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And so a long time ago, maybe almost close to 20 years ago, maybe not, maybe 15, 18 years, something like that, I was out in LA. This was before I became a game designer. I was into acting and I kind of spent some time down there trying to make it as an actor. And I was hanging around on these beaches and I ended up getting my tarot read by this guy who does tarot cards. And I'm kind of very mystical and spiritual. I believe in like astrology and horoscopes and all this other kind of stuff. So I thought tarot cards are really cool. Mm-hmm. And he said something to me that stuck with me my entire life. And he told me a few different things about myself based on the reading. But one of the things he said to me was about money. He said, you're going to become wealthy, but it's going to happen almost like overnight. He said, you're going to have a huge influx of money in one shot. And that's been in the back of my mind all my life. And so that is probably a big kind of reason why I never also didn't choose the path of the slow accumulation of wealth that a lot of people do. Like that's the standard, right? You save 10% of your income over decades and then you can retire. But I was always in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be wealthy one day, but it's going to happen due to something I do. And I guess this is the other part of it. I don't buy lottery tickets. I don't believe, like, even though I've been very lucky in many ways all of my life, very, very lucky. I've always believed that I'm going to have to earn my money, that it's not just going to come to me by doing nothing. It's not going to be by inheritance. It's not going to be by fluke. So those are the two forces that are at play in the back of my mind. One, that I'm going to need to do something to earn it, but two, that it's going to come in abundance kind of suddenly based on whatever action I take. So that's kind of been guiding me through my life. It's like, what is that? What am I going to do? What is that action I'm going to take? What is this? Is it going to be an idea? Is it going to be a product? Some type of entrepreneurial thing I've always known, but for many years I didn't know what. And as I got further and further down my career path in gaming, I've pretty much settled in my mind that my ticket to wealth is going to be through this game. And once I can get it developed, it's going to be massively successful. I'm going to make a lot of money, virtually overnight in a sense. But, that's kind of been on the back of my mind for a long time. And that probably also maybe explains part of my relationship with money and how I've lived my life around it. So what do you think about that?
I think that's so interesting. You said you're the son of a philosopher. So a philosopher would be like, are you creating it that way because that person told you that, so you're going to make it true? Or did he tell you that because you already thought, right? Like, who knows? Yeah. But I do think it's really interesting that sometimes we lock into these narratives and then we make them true even if they don't serve us. I don't feel like you not having the wealth and the money you want has been serving you.
Right.
But to hold on to this idea that like, well, one day though, I'm going to, hit a grand slam and I'm going to have all this money, but it doesn't serve you this whole period of time, like this whole other part of your life.
That's true.
Right.
And then correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if I'm right or wrong about this, or maybe I am, but you start to justify it, right? And so, but I think there's some truth to it. So let me explain what I mean. So money can also lead to problems for people who aren't ready to have it. You hear a lot about it. People who are overly successful at an early age, it can lead to lots of trouble. They don't know how to manage it. They binge on things. They might become addicted to drugs, other, vices. Money is very powerful, but it can also lead to someone's destruction, So one of the things I tell myself is that the reason I haven't, I didn't get rich at like 20 or 30 is because I wasn't ready yet. I was still on this journey of self-discovery and of figuring out who I am and learning about the world. And, I used to be really egotistical in my 20s.
Yeah.
And if I had become like a multimillionaire back then, I probably would have done a lot of stupid, bad things. And maybe it would have led me down a path that I didn't want to go. Whereas now I'm much more balanced and centered with, I feel like a better outlook on the world. And I'm doing, I'm living like a better life that I may have if I had been successful earlier. Now, that might not necessarily be true, but it's certainly a possibility, right? But this is something that the mind tells oneself when they're thinking about these kind of things.
But look, this plays in. This is so, I so love that you brought this up, because you're like, money is, and you just defined it as like this thing that causes problems and does all these.
Or they could, but I mean, I know it's the person that's doing it.
Totally.
But money's like it allows it, it unlocks the potential.
Yeah. And we could say like a golf club and a hammer. Golf club can have somebody play a fun. I'm not a golfer, but could have somebody play a really fun game and really enjoy the ability to be outside and connect and bond with their friends. And a hammer can build houses for the homeless and can put things together and fix things. Both of those things could be used as weapons and cause destruction, right? That the hammer nor the golf club in itself is anything.
Right.
It's literally an object. It's matter.
Yeah.
And look, we could go as far to say, I didn't use it because a gun is so much more controversial, but a gun in itself is just matter, right? We could all have guns. If we didn't know what bullets were, they could be like paperweights, right? Like they wouldn't have any. We've ascribed all these things meaning, and then we use them often to carry out the meaning that they are. And we've been having this conversation. Money has gotten ascribed all this meaning. And to your point, right? It's not all bad. You see like, hey, there's a possibility, but the inherent like default beliefs about it are pretty not, let's just say they're not the beliefs that you actually think you want to be having or that are serving you. And especially as a guy who describes himself as like positive and optimistic and really like the guy who can change the energy of something from negative to positive. I see you as someone that this is an area where like you're out of alignment. You're like out of integrity because money has you actually doing the opposite. It more leans you to the problems, the negative, the conflict, than it does like maybe in your 20s, if you had gotten money, bad stuff would have happened. Maybe not. Like, right? Like, who knows? But it is a great way to justify it.
Yeah.
But it all keeps it from you. It's like all these thoughts are like an invisible force field that don't let money in because you're like, oh, well, I'm not ready for it. I'm supposed to get it in one shot. It's almost like an obstacle course, and money's like trying to figure out how to get through, and you make it so hard it can't get through the obstacle course to get to you.
Yeah, it's like this one small hole that it has to like find its way through or something.
Yeah. So it brings me back to view money just like you might view a hammer, right? I don't see you as somebody who's going to use a hammer as a weapon. Mm-hmm. That you get to prescribe and give money the meaning that you want it to have. Yeah.
Well, I definitely feel that. And, because a lot of the stuff we're talking about is kind of my journey through here, so like, I know some of it's just kind of excuses or to justify it, but I really do, like, I can pinpoint the time in my life when I shifted from being like an arrogant, egotistical young adult to like a mature, reasonable, thoughtful man. So like, I still do think that it may have been detrimental to have been too wealthy too early, not to say for sure it would have led to bad things, but I know how I've changed as a person. But I definitely now and for some time have truly believed that I am ready, for wealth. So I think maybe the issue lies more in this belief that I have that it can only come in one shot, for example. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I do think there, even though that has been a justification for a long time, I think there is some validity to it at least.
Sure. It's all part of your journey and none of it's wrong, right? We're just here to like look at how we can shift it so you can have what you want going forward.
Yeah.
The thing that came to me that I just wrote down is because we've been talking about your relationship to money as if it were like an actual person, right? Like we like this relationship we have to it. If I were a person named Money and the relationship you'd had with me was like the way we've described, like, this obstacle course, one shot, I can't have it now. It's conflict. It's created problems and stress. Man, I'd be pretty upset with you.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be with me, I guess.
Yeah. So the thing that I wrote down was, I think it's time for you to like apologize to money. Mm-hmm. and like the energy, like the way you've been thinking about it, treating it, holding it. And what I'm offering is an exercise in writing in an apology letter, like actually writing out a letter as if you could give money a name, or you could write your money, right? Whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
And writing in a letter, apologizing for who you've been in relationship to it, right? Even things like, I saw other people say that you were bad or that you caused problems, and I believed it, and I never should have, right? Why didn't I look for myself? But like actually really writing a real apology letter to it.
That's a cool idea. I would do that. Yeah.
And then forgive yourself at the end. So write the letter, and then at the end of the letter, forgive yourself for doing what you did, because we don't want you holding on to it either, right?
Yeah.
And then when that's done, so step one is write the letter and let it be as long. Like I would tell it
all out.
Stories, like let it all out, all the stories, right? Like that your parents taught you, all the things that didn't happen that you were upset about not having money for, right? Anything that comes up. And then at the end, forgive yourself, because you didn't know, we're all, none of us know anything, right? We're all on this journey figuring it out. And then I would write a love letter to the relationship you want to create with it, almost as if, put money in the framework of like your wife or your child you're going to have, like almost like to hold the space.
I totally see that. Yeah.
Right? And like what you want to create with it going forward, what your future relationship is. And then that's the thing that you get to practice, right? That's the, after you write that, you might be like, man, I want to do gratitude every day about money. Man, I want to find a way to save, or I want to find a way to give. They're all the same things, because we can only do so many things with money, but it changes the way that we view it. For instance, I realized recently that my view of retirement was like to avoid bad things. So I'm saving to avoid bad things. That's not great. That doesn't feel good. That's why I don't like saving. That feels like crap. Mm-hmm. But if I put up pictures of what the best retirement in the world would look like, dream retirement, and then I was like, oh man, I'm earning that. I'm creating that. That's way more fun, right? Like same thing, both retirement, but one has me like jazzed and excited about it. And one has me like, oh, I have to take out 10% or whatever. And then you avoid it. You don't want to do it. So in that, my hope would be in the love letter that you can see, oh, here are some places that I can start changing because I have to create this loving relationship.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I really enjoy writing too, so that would actually be a fun exercise for me. Nice. That's great. Yeah.
What else I want to see if there's anything that comes up for you. So do you see any other ways that you could practice, or anything else you could do based on the conversation we've had?
I mean, you kind of touched on it already with the gratitude towards money, but I think that, I'd just like to reiterate my own behavior with it, because just even looking back on what I said, for a long time, I said I never cared about money. And it's interesting, like, my wife worries about it quite a bit, and I think that's natural. So part of my responsibility, I feel, in our relationship is to play devil's advocate, and be like, don't worry about money. Like, we're going to be okay. Like, everything's fine, and I think that's important. But at the same time, it's still me kind of not caring about money.
Yeah.
But I'm suddenly, whereas previously when I said that, I looked at that in a positive light. I was like, oh, like that's almost like a good thing. Like, I don't care about money because I'm too busy being happy and loving and being in the moment and caring about life. But now that we've had this whole conversation since I said that, I'm now looking on that as actually a negative thing, that I'm saying I don't care about money, because that's, again, disrespecting money. And that could be part of my apology, right? So just to take that gratitude a step further, is that maybe even when I'm playing devil's advocate, I shouldn't be so heavy-handed to disregard money, right? Mm-hmm. And that as part of gratitude, I should be like, well, I do care about it, actually. It doesn't mean I need to obsess about it, and go like from one extreme to the other. But, like, isn't there a quote that's saying like the opposite of love isn't hate? It's like not caring, or like ambivalence or something like that. So I think it just kind of dawned on me, right? That like maybe this whole attitude of, oh, like money doesn't matter, I don't care about money, that could also be like something that I need to change in my outlook. And but it's not really completely new because we talked about the gratitude, but it's just something that kind of dawned on me that I should be careful about what I'm saying in regards to money, you know?
Yeah. And you even said it when you were saying, you're like, my wife worries about it, which is normal.
Yeah.
Right. If we're speaking about money, like it's a being, why is that normal? That's not fair. Money's like, hey, what did I do? I'm just paper.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just paper. It's humans that have used me, right? It's as if everyone started using hammers to hurt people. And then we're like, well, it's normal to worry about hammers. And I'm like, no, it's not. Hammers can be like whatever we want them to be. And that's the ingrained piece, right? That's the piece that's like so ingrained in all of us. And that's the part that we have to like really pay attention to, because we're like, whoa, I just said it's normal to worry about money. It seems like it's normal, right? It is normal in the context of our society.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of wacky that it's normal, because what did money ever do?
Yeah. I guess it's more like worrying about not being able to provide, like not being able to have food, you know, and clothes for the baby and all that kind of stuff, right? So,
yeah. Which is about you though.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you and I were talking about this, I said, I'm like more worried about me as a provider as I like move into marriage and having kids. That's not money's fault.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's a great, like that you put that in, because we like deflect it onto like, we worry about money instead of being like, whoa, can I do what's necessary to take care of my family? Which actually has nothing to do with money.
True. Very true. Interesting. Yeah.
I love
food for thought.
Yeah. And I love these conversations. Thank you for having this. This is a really brave conversation to have like publicly. Because I'm getting, you know, I feel like I've done a lot of this work and I'm even getting tons for myself. I'm sitting here going, man, that's really about me. You know, my fear isn't about money. It's not about, will we have enough money? It's, will I be the man I need to be in this relationship?
For sure. I mean, that's something you can't help but ask, right? As a provider. And that's so interesting. You know, it's really cool because even just like half an hour ago, whatever it was, when we were kind of defining the terms of like, what are you hoping to accomplish with this conversation? You know, I genuinely didn't really know where it was going to go, but there's just been so many awesome revelations just through this conversation. And yeah, it's like, I feel like I'm looking at things a totally different way now. And I couldn't have anticipated it. I couldn't have known how. And I guess that's part of the magic, right? Because if you already know, then you don't need to have the conversation, right? But that's the beauty of dialogue and sharing ideas and thoughts with other people, is that it's its own little miniature journey, and it can just lead to so many cool like awakening moments or aha moments, you know, which are great.
Well, this feels like a really good place to wrap up, but I want you to create something with me right now so that you don't let this go. What I don't like, or what I don't want for anyone, is that when they have a conversation like this, that they walk away and it was just like a nice conversation and they go right back into their regular life. So easy for that to happen. So is there something you could do like going forward, like as a practice, maybe something every day? Doesn't have to be like could be so like a check-in, a practice that can bring you back to this conversation. So you can, because you need the mindset you've had has been going on for 40-ish years.
Yeah.
So to create a new relationship with money, we have to practice, right? If money was your wife and she just pointed out that you've been, you know, condescending and fearful of her for all these years, to be different would take practice, because your automatic habits cooking. So is there anything you think you can do, write down, schedule to support yourself to like keep coming back to this, so you can keep practicing like the awarenesses that we generated?
Absolutely. So for starters, I'm going to write those 2 letters that you suggested. I 100% will do that. I think there's a tremendous value to that, and it's going to really allow me to like take everything we've discussed and kind of cement it. You know, when you put words out there on paper, it like manifests the thoughts into reality, right? Because they're written down somewhere. And beyond that, I really think that I'm going to be very mindful of how I talk about money and how I think about money. And I like your idea of gratitude. I'm going to attempt to do that as well. So every time there's like a transaction, I'm going to take a moment just to be grateful for that, having that experience. But more so, I'm going to really like look out for the things I say, particularly, like revolving around money and its importance, and labeling it as good or bad. I want to be really mindful about that and not disrespect it in that regard. And I think that if I can do that on a daily basis, that combined with those letters will really improve my relationship with it, and probably allow it to, to flow to me more, in a better way.
I might just write down something like on a Post-it or a piece of paper and put it in one or two places, like in your life, in your office, in your computer, or in your bedroom, to remind you to check in. Like, how's my relationship with money today?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to write that down, and I'll put it on my desktop.
Just as a reminder for the things you just said, it's so easy for us to get caught up in life, and then we forget. As you're writing that down, I would just, for all the listeners, I would encourage you to do the same thing. If you heard something in this conversation that really spoke to you, write something down now that you're going to go do or take on. So this doesn't just become one of those cool podcasts you heard and then you go right back into your life, but like this makes a difference for you. Julian, does this feel like a good place for us to wrap up?
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome. What do you feel like your big takeaways from this conversation were?
The big takeaway, I gotta say, I didn't think I had any type of like limiting beliefs or bad relationship with money. I was really kind of stuck in a bubble, that all my views were justified and normal, and that everything was like fine, and I was on the right path. And this has really opened my eyes to that. That my outlook was flawed, and and now I'm seeing all these holes. And I'm really encouraged that not only have we identified those, but then you've given me some really practical ways to address them. I'm a very practical person, and as a problem solver, I can't help it. But now that you've identified this problem with me, and we've looked at solutions, that I'm going to go forward with them. And I look forward to seeing how that changes things for me, and maybe I'll identify more problems and more solutions in this kind of complex relationship around it.
Yeah.
The big takeaway for me was that I was kind of blind to this whole thing. That and I guess it's just funny that something I do a lot with other people is help them see things that they're not seeing. But it's so difficult to do that with yourself, and so I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity to talk with you, for you to help me look at things in my own life that I couldn't see.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate you saying that. And I think that's so true for all of us. The more I have this conversation out loud, especially the money one, because it's so layered and so thick, like I keep digging further down within myself in this, with my coach, with my fiance, and every layer, there's like a new, like, whoa. And I am right there with you. We can't see it on our own. Yeah. Thank you so much for having the bravery and the courage to come on this platform and talk about it publicly, and talk about it with such like clarity and honesty and like really reverence for yourself, reverence for your relationship to money, reverence for your fears, reverence for your family. There's just, I know I got a lot. I know the listeners will get a lot. And I'm just really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
If people want to know about your games or want to connect with you, you don't have to provide anything. This isn't one of those shows where people have to be like, what's your Instagram? But if people do you want to provide a way for people to have access to you?
Sure. So I can give you my website. It has some information about me, some contact info, and also my portfolio is up there. So if people want to see the games I've worked on and what I've done. So it's https://www.julianmarinoff.com. So it's just my name.
Okay, cool. And we'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. And if someone wants to reach out, I'm pretty sure my email's up there. I got a Discord. Someone just wants to talk about gaming or anything, I'm always happy to do that. So
Awesome.
anyone can feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julian. Thanks for coming on
Thank you.
here. Thanks for bringing this conversation. I think this is a needed to have conversation. We could probably have gone 5 hours talking about
Yeah.
the depths of money or way more. To the listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the show. Thanks for doing the work on your own and looking at this on your own as you listen. I hope you're doing that. I trust that some of you are. If you're listening to this show and you're like, man, I need to come on the show and bring something that I'm challenged by, email me, alex@thedreammason.com, and we can talk about the opportunity. And if you know someone else, please share it with them. And please share this episode with somebody in your life, because it could make a really big difference for them and change something for them. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening. Honestly, I'm just a rebel who found a cause and has a dream, and I'm super grateful for your support. If you got anything from this, please help me out and share this podcast with one person today. You can find me at thedreammason.com or at inspirationalalex on Instagram. You are a dream mason because your dreams don't build themselves.